If you ever needed a good reason to quit your job working for one of the mega carriers, let me tell you this little story. A number of years ago, California enacted a law where all laborers in that state must take breaks. The breaks are mandatory, and not only are the breaks mandatory, they're paid breaks, and that's mandatory too. How does this affect the trucking industry? That includes those 30-minute breaks that are mandatory in the hours of service regulations for truck drivers. So in the state of California, the law states that when you take your 30-minute break out there, you've got to be paid for it. Well, the ATA has just had a big fit over this. They've tried 3 or 4 times now to get through Congress what they have called the Denham Amendment. What they're basically trying to do, make sure that they don't have to abide by this law in California. Now, 3 or 4 times they've tried to get it through Congress. They failed to do that. Well, they're not giving up yet. Now they're appealing to the US DOT to have the US DOT state that federal transport law overrules state transport law. The US DOT is already on record stating that no, it doesn't overrule state law. The ATA and their member companies are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to battle this law in California. And it makes no sense to me at all. Why not just take those millions and millions and millions of dollars they're blowing on lawyers and lobbyists and just pay the drivers? But that's not the mentality. Their first explanation of why they were doing this was, well, if you pay truck drivers for mandatory breaks, that'll only encourage them to take breaks, and that'll slow the commerce on the interstate. And you think, what? Like, buddy, if you don't start paying your guys better now, there's not going to be any interstate commerce. So even the ATA looked at that and thought, well, yeah, I guess that really didn't make very much sense. So now their argument is, well, it's hurting our small member companies, like the small fleets, the 15-guy fleets. And you know what? There are virtually no fleets like that in the ATA because they can't afford the membership. What the ATA is really complaining about is that many of their mega carrier companies have been sued for millions because drivers have taken them to task in the state of California, and they want to be paid for that. They're losing these lawsuits, and it's costing FedEx and some of these other big guys millions, having to pay their drivers what they should have paid them in the first place. Now, and this doesn't only affect just trying to get paid for this mandatory 30-minute break. It's a law in California. This is a reflection on how the ATA thinks about paying their drivers for anything other than driving. That's this by the mile scenario. So bottom line here, drivers, is take a good look at the carrier you're working for. If they're part of the ATA and they're willing to invest millions of dollars not to pay their drivers, is this the kind of company you really want to be associated with? Is this the kind of company you want to tie your future to? I don't think so. I picked up a load broker load coming out of Canada, out of the Toronto area, to get down into California so I could pick up my produce and haul it back. Now, I was dedicated to that buyer, that lettuce buyer that I worked for. So my deal was I would get myself out to California. My trailer was empty. I'd call him. He'd buy me a full load, and then I'd run it home to him. So this load broker load wasn't a big deal. It was boxed bread, as I recall. So I get into LA. I get into this warehouse. I unload the load that I've got on. I get my paperwork signed off, clear, and before I'm ready to leave, the warehouse manager comes up to me and says, "You've got to take these other 9 boxes back that we received a couple of weeks ago. You've got to take them back to the manufacturer, the shipper." I said, "Well, you know, I'd really like to, but I can't. I'm dedicated for my backhaul here. I just can't have anything else on the trailer." And we went back and forth, and you try to be polite in a situation like that because, you know, fighting with the guy really gets you nowhere. You need him to understand where you're coming from. He elevated it, and he got to the point where he got ignorant. He said, "You're taking these 9 boxes back to Toronto, or I'm not unlocking you from the dock." I thought, yeah, well, you got me there. So he had his guy put these 9 boxes on the trailer. I had my paperwork signed off, and this guy had no customs paperwork, no nothing for these 9 boxes he's sending back. Nothing. And you couldn't even get the stuff through customs anyways. But there was no point in arguing with him any further. His mind was set. He decided that's what I was going to do, and that was all there was to it. So I thought, well, how am I going to deal with this problem? I went out to my truck, fired it up, pulled out from the dock, and here, maybe 100 feet ahead of me, is one of those big trash canisters. I just rolled up beside the canister, took the 9 boxes, tossed them into the canister, closed my doors, and carried on my way. So there's a story from my little trucking experience down in California years ago, that something else that made no sense at all. I just couldn't convince this guy that I wasn't working for him. He was convinced I was, but I knew who signed my paychecks, and it was me and not him. Stay safe. I'll see you on the flip, drivers. Take care.